Well, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to today's 18 group webinar, offering a practical guide to dual UK and EU regulatory reporting as the temporary permission regime comes to a close. My name is Mike O'Hara. I'm a contributing editor at 18 Group, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Linda Gibson, who is Director and Head of Regulatory Change at BNY Mellon Pershing, and Linda Kaufman, Executive Vice President, Reference Data Utility at SmartStream. So welcome both. I'll ask you both to introduce yourselves in a moment, but first, before I do, just some information for our attendees on how you can take part in today's webinar. To the right of the video, you'll see a box for questions and polls, and we'll be running 3 polls during the webinar today. So please do vote and help us gauge industry opinion. And I'll remind the audience of when those polls are coming up. If you would like to ask Linda any questions, we'll take questions from the audience throughout the webinar. So please do feel free to add yours in the box underneath the questions tab. So enough of me, and over to our speakers. So if we can start with you, Linda Gibson, welcome to the webinar. Please, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here?
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mike said, I'm Linda Gibson. I head up regulatory change at BNY's Pershing, and that really focuses all around horizon scanning for the new regulations that are coming out across the UK and across EMEA. And really trying to join them up and make sense of them. And my role is really kind of focused on guiding our clients, both the wealth and the institutional clients, about what these changes may mean and what products and maybe solutions we can offer them to guide their way through.
Great, thank you, Linda. And Linda Kaufman, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Kaufman. I'm currently responsible for overseeing the SmartStream reference data utility, which Mike mentioned. RDU provides security master and regulatory data products and services. Before joining RDU, I spent many years at Morgan Stanley in their fixed income reference data space. I'm very happy to join Linda today to talking about this very relevant topic.
Great, thank you both. So before we get into the discussion, we'll run our first audience poll question. And the question is, you should see that coming up on your screen now. How prepared is your organisation for dual UK and EU regulatory reporting after the 2023 withdrawal of the temporary permission regime, the TPR? And we got 5 options that you can choose from: as prepared as possible, well prepared, somewhat prepared, we have started preparations, and we have yet to start preparations. So the 5 options there, please go ahead and vote. And while the audience is completing that poll, let me start with you, Linda Gibson, if that's okay. Could you possibly set the scene for us and describe the TPR and its withdrawal and the problems that this raises for capital markets participants located in the EEA and operating in the UK?
Yeah, thanks. So I think maybe to go back to basics as to why we even need a temporary permissions regime. It's all as a result of the UK's withdrawal from the EU. And the objective of the temporary permissions regime is to minimise the disruption to EU firms operating in the UK, and specifically to allow them to continue to passport and provide services in the UK. But it did have a limited time span of 3 years. It's due to expire December 2023. But it's a kind of a window to allow firms to continue, EU firms to continue to operate in the UK. But the onus is on firms during that period to seek full authorization from the FCA. And that's where the challenges come in, because once you're fully authorised by FCA, you play by the UK rules as well as the EU rules wherever you're also based. So it brings this additional complication around systems and controls and reporting, the topic today. So it's doubling the workload, but it's not even as simple as that. There's, as we'll come on to, and I'm sure Linda will talk us through, there's nuances and there's differences. So that's the challenges to firms.
Understood. And Linda Kaufman, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think although the basic focus for during this TPR kind of expiration is around the authorization process that Linda was just speaking about. As she alluded to, it's not just the logistics of getting yourself signed up and doing all of the, paperwork, putting it lightly, the paperwork to get yourself situated under the FCA regime. It also means that you have to take it seriously, right? And start to think about how you're reporting. Although you should have been reporting, transaction reporting, et cetera, through the FCA already. I think the TPR expiration is really driving firms to, they see it as their kickoff to officially having to operate under the FCA regime. I have to say, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I didn't really pay attention to TPR too much until somebody came to us asking about our MiFID FCA product. And I asked them what kicked off their interest, and it was TPR, because now they realized, okay, I can't just limp along anymore. I have to really officially get my platform in shape and my reporting under control now that I'm going to be, officially registered with the FCA. So as Linda said, it's both the logistics as well as getting your reporting platforms in place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of firms are probably coming to that similar realization, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and we'll see if that shows up in the poll results that we now have. So, it looks like most of our participants say they're somewhat prepared. Quite a large amount have yet to start preparations, more than I would have expected, possibly. Quite a few well prepared as possible, and nobody saying that they have started preparations, but that's pretty much all they've done. So, any thoughts from either of you on those results? Is that what you would have expected?
I'm probably a little surprised at the top two. I mean, so we've got until December 2023, but the expectation is that firms are already reporting to the FCA. I'd have thought that in general, mill firms have been further along in terms of their preparations and working out how they're going to continue to report. Linda.
Yeah, I agree. And I kind of though expected this a bit, because when we would talk to firms about TPR, they saw it more, again, over on the side of around, oh, well, my compliance department is working on that, or my legal department will work on that. And they weren't really paying attention to it. So I think that this is worrisome, but not shocking.
So almost a case of people thinking it's not my responsibility, it's somebody else's.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for that. So moving on to our next question then, and I'll stay with you, Linda Gibson, if that's okay. How can the firms who are located in the EEA and operating in the UK, how can they maintain their operations in the EU and the UK from a regulatory perspective?
Just to speak from a practical view, and I guess that's my role here as a practitioner, where my firm were having to deal with some of these challenges. We were lucky or fortunate in as much as that we already had an EU office well established in Dublin, so the uplift has been minimal. But we've been supporting our clients, and for them, Brexit meant that they needed to consider either stopping servicing if they were EU UK clients, or that they needed to start thinking about co-locating and establishing an office in the UK. And vice versa for our UK clients, that they've considered whether they need to put boots on the ground in the EU. And that's the fact. It really is boots on the ground. It's no good just to consider that you can have a rep office either in the UK and EU and continue to do your business. The requirements around FCA authorization are that they expect you to have a fully staffed office, so you have systems, offices, staffs in the UK. You're very much boots on the ground. You need to be operational. So you need to think about how that fits in with your business strategy. If you're already operational in the EU, what does your UK strategy look like? How different does it need to be or not? And kind of what are the nuances? So it really is a big picture view. You've got to start thinking right from the top about the offices, the people, the staff, the systems, and then build it out from there.
Yeah. And Linda Kaufman, thoughts?
Yeah, not much to add there other than what we noticed was in the beginning, people, EU firms were really, that were on the fence, where I think they were waiting to see the volumes, how it was going to affect, their business, whether or not they were going to keep. And so we've seen firms decide not to stay in the UK, and then we've seen firms decide and then scramble to set up everything that Linda just described. So
I'd echo that, Linda. We had firms initially that decided they didn't need to co-locate, they could rely on reverse solicitation, or they would exit a pocket of clients in a particular EU state because it wasn't worth doing. But then over time, wealth managers grow through acquisition, and on the basis that equivalence has never come through, we didn't expect it, but I think some firms certainly still kind of hoped it would come through. Yeah. So we've seen firms in the last 12 months decide, well, we didn't make this decision back at Brexit, but maybe we'll make that decision now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great, thank you both. So we'll run another poll here. So if we have that shared, there it is. And the poll question is, what are the challenges of achieving compliance across 2 reporting regimes at your organisation? And this is a multiple answer question. So there are 6 potential challenges: sourcing data for both EU and FCA regulations, managing increasing volumes of data, containing costs, horizon scanning, lack of suitable systems and resources, or no challenges. So please do tick all of the ones that apply to your firm, and then we'll see how that looks. And while the audience answers that question, I have one for you, Linda Kaufman. What do you see as the challenges of achieving compliance across 2 reporting regimes? And taking that kind of poll into account, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I probably sound like a bit of a broken record when people ask me this question, but I do feel strongly that the number one challenge is making sure that you have someone in your organization that has the knowledge to monitor and understand the regulations, or at minimum, you have really good documentation on the data and processes involved in around your reporting framework. We're in the Great Resignation, as they say, and so the chances of you having somebody still at your organization that was there in 2017 that helped build your framework is probably slim at the moment. And so now all of a sudden you have to open up the patient and figure out how you're going to do the dual reporting. It may mean new data sets. It may mean reporting obligation rule changes. And so making sure that you keep your eye on the ball and keep the right level of expertise in-house, I think is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. And what would you add to that, Linda Gibson?
I think ongoing regulatory change is just a given now. We worked for many years towards MiFID II, and that was landed. And here we are now unpicking both the EU and the UK regulators separately, unpicking bits of MiFID. And we've still got new regulations coming through. In the first 3 months of this year, we had the EU MiFID Quick Fix Directive. We had the UK prudential requirements. And in the UK, we had the operational resilience requirements. Each one of those were pretty chunky pieces of regulation that went right across the firm. So your regulatory change, your compliance, your risk, your legal teams are continually having to pivot, to Linda's point, to deal with these regulations. And they're not always scheduled. to work together. You'll find you'll find one team, you're having to work towards a new UK regulation and a contrasting EU regulation that maybe doesn't match up at all. So it can be quite inefficient in terms of your resources. So really good, strong regulatory horizon scanning focus, so you can inform your business what's coming up.
And try to get alignment across those.
Yeah, but it's this forward look. You can put all your resources into delivering the MiFID Quick Fix Directive and you think you're done. And then you didn't realise that 2 other changes of MiFID have been coming through in the last 6 months. And if you'd known, maybe you could incorporate some of those elements in the work that you've just done.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. So we're getting the poll results in now, and again, maybe not surprisingly, the biggest challenge for firms is containing costs, because there obviously are a lot of costs involved in doing this. Sourcing data for both EU and FCA regulations, and that comes to your point, Linda Kaufman, and lack of suitable systems and resources, followed by managing increasing volumes of data, horizon scanning, and no challenges. Not surprising that nobody thinks that that there are no challenges. Linda Kaufman, is that, I mean, we didn't really talk so much about costs, or neither of you really spoke so much about costs in your answers there. Is this a surprise to you, or would you see that this is a big issue?
No, it is a big issue, right? Because if you have, for 2 reasons, we see that firms often in the past, when it wasn't such a regular, the wheel wasn't always turning and we weren't having this cadence of regulatory change that Linda just spoke about, firms tended to throw a lot of people at it, at the regulatory problem. And then once things settled down, they would put those resources somewhere else. You can't do that anymore. So it's really important to invest and make sure that you get the buy-in from your stakeholders and your budget holders, to invest in the platforms so that you can configure them to change, and not have to have such a heavy people reliance, make your system smarter. And so I think containing those, and I don't know why it's for the lack of the horizon scanning, but it always seems to be a surprise when they're coming. It's there, it's on paper. They give you 2 years, 3 years, 18 months, whatever. So those costs can't be a surprise anymore, but you just have to be smarter about it, and invest in things up front now, so that you're not constantly opening up the wallet to keep things going every time there's a change. It could be much more cost effective if you invest in the platform up front.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the horizon scanning. There's nothing that I think can motivate you like a deadline.
Yeah,
certainly in my business. Anything you'd add to that, Linda, Gibson?
Yeah, when I was talking about efficiencies, it's staff and it's people costs as well as system costs. Because if you're continually getting contractors in to help you with a big piece of work like MiFID II, and you let that resource and expertise go out the door without retaining that knowledge, and then there's another piece and you get another set of people in, that is really inefficient and it's expensive. So just keep in mind that you need to, whatever systems you need, you'd still need some good in-house expertise.
Yeah. So, I mean, continuing on the theme of regulation here and staying with you, Linda Gibson, how do you think firms can best address regulatory change, such as the FCA's plans to widen the gap between UK regulation and the EU's MiFID II?
I wouldn't say that the FCA are looking to widen the gap. They are going to do what's best for the UK market. They've been fitting in with what was the EU, and now they're a sole regulator with one country. So they're very much focusing on what's best for the UK market, whereas the EU still has to have a focus right across the piece. But we're here today talking about the temporary permissions regime and the impact of regulatory reporting. And regulatory divergence is very much a key issue, because both regulators, when they are looking to amend existing regulations such as MiFID, I'll call that up again, one of the probably the most complex pieces of MiFID was transaction reporting with the explosion of the data fields. And firms invested a lot of money and time and resources in aiming to get a system and robust procedures to get that right. And now potentially we have both the EU and the UK regulators looking to make some amendments to that regime. But just to go back on that horizon scanning piece, we were looking at just what we were tracking because we maintain a regulatory timeline internally going forward about 2 to 3 years, and we share that with our clients. And we looked at 2021 and realized that between just the FCA and ESMA, they'd published over 4,500 publications in 2021 alone.
That's crazy. Absolutely.
It's a huge number. Regardless of if the majority don't apply to you, you've still got to look at everything and make that determination whether that has impact or not. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add to that, Linda Kaufman?
Well, I think that the divergence is here to stay, and it doesn't matter how wide or thin it is, right? So it could be something that seems very simplistic, but from a systems, I'm going back to the systems, but from a system perspective, something very simplistic can not be simplistic depending on how things are built. So I think that, firms just can't assume that your existing framework is enough. So even if there's minimal divergence, the bottom line is that you are now operating under 2 regimes. Yeah. So you have to assume the effort is 2 times, 2 reports, 2 data sets, to reporting obligation rules, et cetera, and so forth. And if there's parity in something that, then wonderful, but don't assume it. And that goes for control framework too. I think that people separate that in their minds, right? So let's just get out the front door, make sure the piping's there, make sure everything's working. And then I'll do my control framework. But now when you're thinking about control framework, if one regime, has rule A and one regime has rule B, your control framework now needs to incorporate both of those. So again, it comes back to that holistic view and making sure that you're staying up to your expertise in-house is up to snuff.
Yeah, and just staying with you for a moment, Linda Kaufman, one of the things that Linda Gibson, that you mentioned in your previous answer was this explosion of data. So Linda Kaufman, what are the data and data management challenges of dual reporting and regulatory change?
Yeah, I think many firms are single-threaded when it comes to data sets. So for instance, after Brexit, many firms, FIRDs and FIDRs are the 2 main data sets that the FCA and ESMA produce for users. And many firms decided that they did not need to collect data from both regulators, that they could just kind of get by with one set of data. And that's not going to fly in the long term. So they really need to start thinking about not being single threaded, because there are differences in the data, or there will be differences in the data. And it's easy to assume that simplifications of reporting rules mean simplifications of data. So or data management, and that's not always the case. So if you look at the post-trade reporting changes that the FCA just came out and we're talking about doing with designated reporters classification, that's very different from what they would happening now with the SI registry, the SI status for post-trade reporting. And so it's from the industry's perspective, they felt very comfortable with this, right? It really simplifies things when you have to decide who does the post-trade reporting. However, it's another data set. And so even though things are simplified from a rule perspective, a lot of times it means more data. You're onboarding more data and trying to clarify how to use that data. So I would say, trying not to be single-threaded with your data management, and then also making sure that you understand the connection of data to any changes that are happening, right? Just because at first glance you read the new rule or the divergence and you say, "Ooh, this is easier for me," it actually may mean more data that you have to consume.
Yeah, and Linda Gibson, any other data or data management challenges that you've identified?
Yeah, I think I'd echo that point around you think something's been simplified and everyone in your firm goes, oh, that's brilliant. So we need, we need to do less and we can switch things off. And it's quite often not the case. Again, using transaction reporting as an example, ESMA decided that, they only wanted EU instruments reportable. And before it was just a yes-no reportable flag. But now we have reportable in the EU, reportable in the UK, reportable in both.
Yeah.
So it's not actually simpler unless you're only operating in one jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So I'd echo that point. You've really got to understand what the change is and what that means to your data and your systems.
Okay, so I guess that's the first step, and just kind of expanding on that, Linda Kaufman. I mean, obviously we talked about the challenges here. Understanding what needs to be done is part of it, but how do you think these challenges can really be resolved, and what kind of RegTech solutions might be available to help with this?
Oh my goodness, there are so many great RegTech providers out there. Of course, I am a fan of the RDU, but overall, the explosion of RegTech solutions, over the last 5 years has just been brilliant. Most of these are the solutions attack different aspects or components of the reporting. So some solutions are very focused on the actual report generation, while others are focused on control framework, or others are focused on the data and reporting obligation. Sure, there are some, all-you-can-eat solutions out there, but I think that I would encourage firms to mitigate their risks by leveraging the RegTech solutions that fill the specific gap that they have. So back to what we've been saying, I think Linda and I have both been saying, know your systems and have the expertise in-house, because then you can identify where your weaknesses are and go out there. You have lots of choices now, so don't feel that you have to buy, if you do want to outsource something, there's a lot of choices out there. So understand your problems and then go and fit something. The two things that we see, the use cases that we see coming up a lot is for historical data, for back testing and re-reporting, and also more use cases around control framework and smart reconciliation. So people are really looking to bring that reconciliation aspect internally to avoid some of the potential of fines, et cetera.
Yeah. And Linda Gibson, can you maybe take us through some of the practical steps that firms can take to achieve ongoing compliance in both the UK and the EU?
So I'll go back to horizon scanning. Make sure you've got a really robust procedure in place to actually scoop up all these changes that are coming through. And you have some kind of hopefully automated funnel so that you can understand what's relevant to your business. Don't restrict yourself just to the consultation papers, policy papers. We very much follow the speeches that are made by the regulators and the Dear CEO letters. The speeches very much signal their direction of travel and what they're looking to do. And by picking up on those can give you a head start on what you might need to do. And the Dear CEO is kind of almost the other end of the spectrum. It's where things are beginning to go wrong, and it's a warning to firms in those sectors that they need to make changes.
Yeah,
I think just to carry on, it's very much around robust controls and procedures. The danger is if you look at things in isolation. You look at one particular change, I don't know, operational resilience in the UK, and you just completely focus on what the UK requirements are, not realizing that in Ireland the CBI's requirements are coming through as well, and you may be able to leverage, as we're doing, the majority of the work that we've done for the UK to meet the Irish requirements that are coming through at the end of the next year. And it's just, that's why it's also important to do, I think, a lot of testing and have robust controls around what changes you're going to put in place. We'll probably come on to that a bit more later.
No doubt. Thank you. So we've been getting quite a few questions coming in from the audience. So Maybe we can look at a few of these and see. I mean, I think you partially answered this one in your previous answer there, Linda Gibson. But the first question we've got here is, our organisation is liable for dual reporting and it will be a large task. What is a good starting point? So again, this comes back to practicalities, but where would you start from if you haven't done anything yet?
Know your business. That is the 101. Know your business. Make sure across the business that nobody's started up some new products, a new service. They've started trading a different instrument. So make sure you have a firm grasp of what business it is the firm's doing. And from there, work out what the reporting requirements are. And that's really across the business to make sure you've got a good handle on what business you're conducting. It's no good going 9/10 of the way through and then somebody, we've in whatever office, they're starting to trade derivatives, or they want to trade derivatives in 6 months. So it's a mixture of knowing your business and very much horizon scanning to know what's going to impact you. The regulators' websites, they're actually very helpful. There's a lot of really good information on the FCA's website about Brexit, about the temporary permissions regime and what firms need to do. And also industry associations, depending on what part of the market you're in. There's some very good trade associations that support their members. Yeah,
so know your business is the most important thing.
Yes,
and then the whole horizon scanning is key to know what's coming and how it applies to you and so on. Linda Kaufman, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, of course, I come from the data system side. So I would say that once you know your business and you understand what's coming, then it's understanding where you are now. So, you don't necessarily need to start from scratch, but what makes sure that you understand what framework you have in place now. If you're using third parties, what third parties you have in place now, what the contracts look like, and then decide how you're going to attack it from a from a systems perspective. So do you need to onboard new data sets? Do you need to, engage with new third-party providers? Do you need to pick select a different arm, a different API, whatever it is, but take a first pass at this is where I stand now, and then start adding where your missing pieces are. But you can't do that unless you know your business. So I think it's a little bit of both.
So that's fundamental. So here's a good one. Where firms are required to dual trade report, do you see issues with duplicative reporting whereby price forming trades could be published in 2 different jurisdictions, misleading the market? I don't know which of you would like to pick up on that one.
I would hang my hat on that the regulators need to give an oversight on that. If that is happening, that's probably something that the industry needs a bit more guidance on. I haven't seen it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would guess that it's probably going to happen, just like over reporting is happening and all this other fun stuff that. But I think that again, the regulators will be on the lookout for it, and hopefully in time that will sort itself out. But yeah, I think it's something that we should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, thank you. Dual reporting will add to our reporting costs. What advice would the speakers give on trying to contain the additional costs? Who wants to pick up on that one?
I mean, I'm again sounding like a broken record, but I really feel like if you can build a system that's configurable so that you're not rebuilding and creating building the masterpiece over and over and over again per regime, it's beneficial, right? So if you have a basic platform that after a few switches on and off, you can direct it into the direction that you need it to go per regulation, and just make sure that again you're sourcing both data sets. I think that's going to keep your costs down. If you have to rebuild everything for, and duplicate everything for each regime, then it is going to be very costly.
Yeah. Anything to add on that, Linda Gibson?
Yeah, that's really sums it up. You need to have a kind of a strategic approach to this, because if you keep just bolting on additional bit of reporting, something else has come out. Oh, put a manual process in, that will get us over the line, we'll figure it out later. And then something else comes along. It's really not gonna fly, because there's so much change coming through. So it comes back to this kind of mantra of having kind of really know your business, robust processes and controls.
And the answer is not to throw bodies and throw systems.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Just have a couple more questions, and then we'll go back to our prearranged ones. UK regulators have talked about some regulatory changes, as you've talked about in the webinar too. But to what extent do you expect the UK to make changes, and in what time frame? Okay, Linda Gibson, is that a good one for you?
That's a good question. Very wide though, really, really wide. I mean, as I say, we track everything, or everything that's relevant to our business and our clients' business, I should say. And the question was around time frame, and we're tracking out to the end of 2023. I think the main things that we're focusing on, if that helps, is the changes to MiFID. And very much there's areas of divergence. There's subtle changes, but it doesn't have to be a big change to put a spanner in the works in terms of switching reporting on or off, collecting and storing data differently, reporting to your clients differently, or switching reporting off. In the EU, we've moved to paperless reporting for investor reporting. The UK has so far only mandated that for wholesale clients. So we're still waiting, for example, to see as part of the wholesale markets review whether they will mandate electronic reporting for retail clients. So the ones we're really tracking are the changes to MiFID and the wholesale markets review, which is going to be a quite wide-ranging across the markets. We're expecting there's the consumer duty that doesn't really impact reporting per se, but it will mean that firms will need to collect and maintain a lot more management information. But I'd say MiFID and the wholesale markets reviews are the big two that we're tracking and waiting for more information to come out on.
Okay, thank you. So back to our original question. So maybe if I can put this one to you, Linda Kaufman, well, to both of you maybe, but looking at penalties for getting this kind of thing wrong, or the I guess the benefits of getting it right. Well, beyond pure compliance, what do you see as the key I guess benefits of getting it right and the penalties of getting it wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is still the pure compliance aspect and reputational and monetary reasons, right? I mean, that's the driving, I think, force for most of this. And ESMA just announced their latest sanctioned numbers, and I think they were up like 40% over last year. So they're there, and they're important to keep in mind, and something that still should be the biggest driver behind making sure that you get this right. I think that cost, which somebody brought up in one of the questions, is another reason, right? If there's nothing more expensive than having to go back and do re-reporting, having to go back and rewrite systems, having to go back and or have a huge operations staff that's dealing with all the exceptions as you're trying to generate reports that are not accurate, and you're cleaning them up quickly before you send them out. All of that, excuse me, all of that is very, very costly. So I think that those are the two driving kind of reasons to make sure that you get this right, is to keep your costs down and to make sure that you're not experiencing any reputational or monetary downside.
Yeah. Linda Gibson?
Benefits of getting it right, but it's all around good governance as well. You've got good oversight of your business. Firms should be able to use that data for their own purposes. It gives you a real insight to your own business, so they shouldn't just be blindly collecting it and reporting it through to the regulator. Have a good look at that in terms of management information. It might give you a few surprises about what you thought, how your business was performing, kind of the volumes, maybe the jurisdictions in which you're most active in. So try and use that data for yourself. because the penalties of getting it wrong, aside from things like reporting, are very binary. So it's very easy for the regulator to prove that a firm's failed and take enforcement action, which nobody wants. That's on top of any re-reporting, kind of a Section 166 oversight. But it's also very much, it's the reputational risk. If things go wrong, you're called out by a regulator, that's going to hurt your business far more than simply getting the reporting wrong. It's, your clients, your potential clients to see that. And that's why, we take reporting very, very seriously in terms of resources and oversight.
Yeah.
Can I just really quick? So very good point that Linda just brought up about how it's valuable data, not just for reporting, but also internally. So I do think that that's something that firms need to think about more, right? If you get the data and your underlying systems correct and built in a very efficient way, you're not just helping your regulations, you're helping your overall data management in general.
Yeah. No, I think that's a key point. There are real business benefits to getting your data strategy right and so on, beyond compliance. So we've got one more poll, which I'd like to run now, if that's okay. And the poll question is, what type of approach is your organization taking to dual reporting? A strategic approach to cover long-term change, a tactical approach to cover short-term change, an initial tactical approach with plans for a strategic approach, or we've not yet decided what approach we'll take. So again, while the audience answers that poll, we'll move on to another question, and this one's for you, Linda Gibson. How would you expect EU and UK regulatory reporting requirements to differ going forward? Will the approaches that we've talked about still be applicable, making a strategic rather than tactical approach best for the long term? I would guess the answer is probably yes, given what we've talked about so far, but what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, we've covered a fair bit around this question already, that regulatory change will keep coming, and they don't have to be huge differences in terms of divergence for it to be impactful for the business. Tactical kind of approaches really aren't sustainable. They might get you over a particular deadline, and if there might be a valid business reason why you've got resources elsewhere and you just need to get that over the line. Yeah. But to be able to operate and knowing that far more change is coming through, you really do need a strategic approach. And you don't want to be creating manual processes which are prone to error and just aren't sustainable.
Yeah, I guess it's probably a combination of both, right? Because strategic approaches do take time, whereas, like you say, the tactical approaches can get you over the line, but if you don't want to be doing too many of those.
And then you forget, and also that you forget that you did something manual somewhere 6 months ago, the person leaves or whatever. And it's not necessarily
as well documented or whatever it might be. Linda Kaufman, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, not much more to add to that. I think we've discussed, and prefer not to go the tactical route. Smarter, more cost effective if you go the more strategic route. And I would hope that firms now, since we're where we are from a MiFID perspective at least, although there'll be changes, there should be a relative stable state of something already created. So just really to look at that and determine how you can make that stronger and support the dual.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. We've got some poll results up, but it's interesting to see what our audience approach to this is. And 0 are saying that they're taking a strategic approach to cover long-term change, and 36% kind of equal a tactical approach to cover short-term change, and an initial tactical approach with plans for a strategic approach. Is this a surprise? Are you surprised that no one seems to be taking a strategic approach here?
I am. I always look for I'm always optimistic. So I am a little bit, just because I feel like we've come, it's not in years past, it's like, okay, here's this big regulatory change and everybody has to be ready for it. And we're running really hard for a date. But as Linda mentioned, this is not stopping now, right? Every, I don't know, few months, there's going to be something that's going to change.
Always.
So right. So it's not like the in previous years where you can run really hard, throw something tactical at it, and it stays that way for many years. It's not going to be. So I encourage people to start thinking more strategically.
Yeah. Do these results surprise you, Linda G?
I think the 0% on strategic is a surprise. I would hope the people in the second bucket with plans for a strategic approach. I hope maybe some of the things that we've discussed today kind of really will point them in that direction, just for their own sanity, to be honest, because there's so much change coming through. And to try to remember what you did on the last change, and then when you need to come and revisit it again.
And I think it's doubly surprising, really. Sorry to interrupt there, but because there are always going to be changes and regulations coming along. So to see that nobody seems to be taking a strategic approach to this, where you could ask this question 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There'd still be lots of regulations, coming up, and would people back then saying they're taking tactical approaches? Is that a problem that has existed in the industry for a while and will continue to exist, that there are too many of these tactical approaches, do you think?
It may be, but I do think that it's difficult. You don't know how firms approach, and firms here are being really open, and that's great. And we're sharing our insights, and Linda can talk from a vendor perspective what's out there. So hopefully it's all food for thought.
Great, and it is food for thought. Thank you. Before I come to our last question, we've got a couple more questions from the audience have come in. And we've got a bit of time, so maybe we can address a couple of these. And we kind of touched on this earlier in the webinar, but will the end of the TPR change the market very much, with some firms choosing not to operate in the UK anymore? What are your thoughts on that, either of you?
I personally don't think it will change. I think, FCA, I meant to look it up. I can't remember how many hundreds, if not thousands, of applications they've got from firms that notified them that they wanted to be in the temporary permissions regime, and then it's incumbent upon them to submit a full application to FCA. I think the FCA have announced already they've refused a few applicants, but I think this is literally a handful, and it's firms that maybe didn't really intend to go ahead and become fully authorised in the UK. I think everything's still settling post-Brexit, but the UK marketplace is still very attractive. So there will be still a very strong number of firms that want to operate in the UK, and vice versa. We're seeing firms, as I was saying earlier, that have decided that even though we're 18 months post-Brexit, they are still now thinking about maybe, or next year might be the time to open an EU office, realising that equivalence isn't going to happen. Yeah. And if they want to service both EU and UK clients, then they probably need to change their business strategy. Yeah.
Anything to add, Linda? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I don't think there's going to be a huge change. Like, you're not going to see anything drastic, but we have spoken with a few firms that are not going to renew or go forward with their UK offices. But it's not such a huge number that I think it's going to make any kind of impact. I think there are, but it's not zero, I guess, is my point. We do have some firms that have decided not to.
Okay, thank you. There's a question that's a little bit specific. I'm not sure whether this is something you can answer or not, but I'll put it to you anyway. Could a Swiss firm establish a subsidiary in the UK without forming a UK-based company? They're an insurance broker.
Can a Swiss firm incorporate in the UK without
forming a UK-based company? Establish a subsidiary in the UK without forming a UK-based company.
You could do a branch of
branch,
top of my
yeah.
head, but that does need to be fully authorised by the FCA. So there's probably, off the top of my head, not that many advantages, unless it makes good sense to them. But I can't really give specific advice on that. That's probably one to go and get some legal advice on.
Okay, I think that's all the audience questions, but I don't think I've missed any. So I guess coming to the last question then, I'd like to ask both of you about what advice, I mean, we talked about this kind of practical steps earlier on, but what are some of the key advice points you give to practitioners working on reporting for both EU and UK regulations? Linda Kaufman.
Okay, I'm going to sound again repeating myself. Number one, invest in hiring and keeping regulatory expertise in-house. Number two, invest in a framework that's highly flexible to accommodate change. And number three, I would say evaluate your options with respect to RegTech solutions, especially for those that are doing this tactically at the moment. You have a lot of great solutions out there that you can leverage, but just make sure that they fit your specific needs.
Yeah, and final words of advice from you, Linda Gibson?
Not too dissimilar. You know, I would plug the need for horizon scanning, given that's my remit around regulatory change. But it really does pay dividends in your ability to help your firm join up the different regulations and also keep abreast of changes. Things get delayed, things get tweaked. You don't want your technology team of building something that 6 months ago was changed or even dropped. So keep up on horizon scanning. If you are putting changes through, you choose your vendor, you know, choose with care. It's your reputational risk who you partner with. Not all vendors are regulated themselves because they don't need to be. They don't provide investment services. So choose your vendor with care and do a lot of testing and reconciliation. And the third one, I'd echo Linda's point about, you know, keep your expertise in-house. You need to know how your systems work and have a good audit trail around that.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Well, I think this has been a great discussion, and I really appreciate the insights that both of you have shared today, and hopefully the audience have been educated as well. But yeah, no, fantastic. So I'd like to thank you both, Linda Kaufman and Linda Gibson, for sharing that expertise and sharing your experience. And thank you to SmartStream for sponsoring today's webinar. Just before we go, just a few notes about some upcoming A-Team group webinars. If you scroll down your screen to additional options, you can register for our forthcoming webinar on the role of data lineage in KYC and ESG investigations. You can take a look at A-Team Connect, which is our platform that you can use to deliver highly effective and interactive events and webinars. And you can download the 9th edition of our regulatory data handbook. So that will help with your horizon scanning activities, I guess. But that said, that's pretty much it for today. So thank you again to Linda Gibson and Linda Kaufman. And thank you to everybody here who's taken part in the webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did very well with 2 Lindas.
Yeah, that was a challenge, but I think I just got through it. Thank you. And just a quick note to our audience to please complete the feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Thanks again, everyone, and goodbye.